Date with a Debut is recorded and produced on Awabakal Country, and I pay my respects to all elders past and present and extend that to any First Nations people tuning in. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. On with the show.
In Stinkbug, I wanted to highlight and I guess exaggerate how tangled all that workers' family stuff can get when workplace challenges arrive. Like, what happens when your dad fires you? Or what happens when you have to dob on your sister to save yourself? Like, what happens when you find out that you're not paid the same as your twin brother?
Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journey to publication. If you're looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, jump online and give us a thumbs up, a 5-star review. It really helps the show out. If you also want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. Want to support the show more? You can also subscribe to my Patreon in the description to get early access to episodes, book reviews, recommendations, and a whole lot more. Wherever you are listening, thank you for listening to us and supporting the Australian book industry. You can also find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. Today, I'm joined by Sinéad Stubbins. She is a writer, editor, and cultural critic from Naarm, also known as Melbourne. Among writing for The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald, she has also become known for her popular TV recaps on Junkie. Her work has appeared in The Guardian, The Big Issue, Vulture, Pitchfork, and The Saturday Paper, among other publications. And her essay collection, In My Defence, I Have No Defence, was published in 2021 by Affirm Press. But we're here today to talk about her fiction debut, Stinkbug, also published by Affirm Press, which you can get a copy of right now down in the description. We will discuss some very mild spoilers, so I recommend you grab yourself a copy now, or at least very soon. I started off by asking Sinead about transitioning over to writing fiction, being a culture writer in the saturated world of today, and why she wanted to tackle a story about the corporate space. Sinead, welcome to Date with a Debut.
Thank you for having me. I'm coming in from a very frosty morning in Naarm this morning, so it's very nice to have a chat.
It's very lovely to chat with you. I can relate. It's been absolutely bucketing down here in Newcastle at the time of us recording, but it has been weather where you can enjoy some reading and have a bit of time to yourself. And before we kind of dive into Stinkbug, in classic fashion, in the preparation for this podcast, I got distracted by your career because, God, you've had a vast career. You've written for so many places. At the risk of hitting you with hardball opener, there's an opportunity here that I really kind of want to jump on because you've done a lot of culture writing. You've done culture writing for a number of years now, and I'm kind of curious as to where the space of culture actually fits right now because it seems like it's in such a strange place. Would you kind of agree with that out of curiosity?
Yeah, absolutely. From when I started writing about TV and film to now, it has changed so much. Like when I started writing about 15 years ago about the culture space, there just wasn't as many TV shows and movies as there are now. Like, you'd have these like shows like Game of Thrones that it felt like everyone was watching, or MasterChef, or The Bachelor. It felt like everybody was watching it. And now the sort of mediascape is so fractured, and we have so many streaming services and whatever that that monoculture doesn't really exist anymore. So it's so hard to get people's attention, much harder now than it was about 15 years ago.
It does seem like it's such a strange. It does seem it is in such a strange place right now because on the one hand we seem saturated by the world of content and people gravitate towards it. People are interested in it. You've got these big, massive, long shows, as you mentioned. Everything's kind of split up with the streaming platforms. In the visual space, cinemas are struggling for in terms of getting there. But yeah, it also seems because that with that saturation, it also seems to be viewed as something of less and less value, given a lot of people who work in that space seem to be finding it harder and harder to actually eke out a living. And there's and at the risk of kind of segueing it into the idea of stuff that we talk about with Stinkbug, there's also kind of an element of, I don't want to say commodification of culture, but there's a focus on more trends than necessarily expression. Out of curiosity, where does culture kind of sit for you? And does that sort of trend or idea or kind of concept about how culture is sitting for you ring true in any way?
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like our attention spans, or like the media's attention span, is much shorter than it used to be. So like, you have to, if you're like TV show or your film or your album doesn't make a splash in like the first week, you're kind of dead and buried. Like, I think we have less patience for like, things that gain popularity over time, word of mouth, blah, blah, blah. Like, it feels like if it's not a hit straight away, it's kind of done, which is such a shame. Like, it's because of that saturation that you were talking about, audiences just get paralyzed by choice. I think the tyranny of choice, right? Like people spending hours scrolling on Netflix or whatever instead of actually watching something. We somehow feel like we have endless time to consume things, but we can't. We're less likely to dedicate ourselves to like a TV show or a movie or an album that we haven't heard much about. Like it's a weird time, man. It's a weird time to be a culture writer, and just a culture consumer in general.
Yeah, it is a weird time. And I do think, kind of segueing into this, that, there is an element of like off the back of trying to, with those short spans, it is a case of trying to jump on trends, trying to jump on things that apparently work. And I think that's why you're seeing so much a dip back into nostalgia so much. And it does, and I think people seem to be rebelling against that a little bit because there's a feeling of kind of corporate element to it, which with Stinkbug, I kind of get this space. You were very drawn to this idea of the corporate space. There was a really great quote that you provided kind of in the link, in kind of a lot of the promotional material for Stinkbug, where you kind of wanted to touch on, the corporate space, but also specifically being in that space, the wellness movement's infiltration of the corporate space. Talk to me about that space, and particularly why you were drawn to that for your debut fiction novel.
Yeah, okay. Well, something I've noticed more and more in the past few years is that, like you say, the infiltration of like wellness and well-being and sometimes psychology speak in corporate vernacular, which is really interesting. Like when you look at sports, those sort of motivational mindfulness workshops have existed like since the 70s even. In the last few years, like some of those retreats and training camps, like particularly in the AFL, I'm thinking, have come under fire for like triggering trauma, being culturally insensitive. It's like they're kind of, to forge intimacy with their teams, they're kind of, using trauma as the way to unlock that. So that's the big picture thing, but I'm also interested in like, there's been studies that have come out in the last few years. Like there's one from Oxford University that I'm thinking about specifically, about if these kind of wellness measures in corporations actually work. And there's a lot of data that suggests that they don't. So mandatory mindfulness time on a Friday or compulsory yoga before work, like doesn't actually make people more relaxed. It makes them more stressed at their jobs. So like, people want what they've always wanted at corporation: decent pay, sick leave, the ability to clock off. It's not complicated. So I think like, even though it's great that, the corporate space is thinking more about work-life balance and like how to actually keep people happy at work and what they need, I think sometimes there can be a sort of dark undercurrent to it and a little bit of hypocrisy there.
Yeah, we'll touch on this a little bit more when we actually dive into the book itself, but I have one kind of last question before we do that, and that is, of course, you've done a lot of writing. This isn't actually your first book per se, because you obviously did your essay collection as well in 2021 with Affirm. In my defense, I have no defense. But this is your debut fiction. This is your dive into the world of fiction. First of all, kind of talk us through that from a creative standpoint and the writer standpoint. What was that experience like? Because the universal experience I've had from other authors on this podcast who's done that, like, say, for example, Mark Wales, when he did his book Outrider after doing Survivor, that moving to fiction is bloody hard, going from one way to the other. Would that be true?
Yeah, I was terrified, absolutely terrified. Yeah, but not to turn people off, but bloody hell. It's just, you know, because I've been writing sort of essays and whatever for so long, writing a collection of nonfiction pieces came quite naturally, and like sort of it was quite an organic process. And I'd written a few short stories before diving into a novel, but like, oh, bloody hell, you just have to make the whole thing up. It's all coming from your brain. Oh, I know. What a nightmare. So I think it's just, you know, I mean, of course, trying something for the first time is always going to be super daunting. But I think what I wasn't prepared for is because, you know, I'm a writer. I work to deadlines, usually very tight deadlines. The amount of time that you have to sit with a novel is enormous. Like it can be a few years. I don't really believe people who are like, yeah, I took 3 weeks of leave and I wrote a whole novel. It's like, yeah, but then what happened after that? You know what I mean? But yeah, so I think I wasn't prepared for, you do fall out of love with the material and you kind of have to like find ways to re-engage yourself because, you know, you write a draft and then you write another draft and then the editor looks at the draft and one of you just like the changes need to be made and maybe you don't think it's ready, maybe they don't think it's ready. Like there are so many iterations of the book before it becomes the final thing. So yeah, it was scary. It was really scary. And just knowing that like it could go in so many different directions and, you know, the power is yours, as Captain Planet would say. It's an exciting prospect, but it's also quite terrifying. You're like holding a beating heart in your hand, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, I still can't believe I bloody did it, to be honest. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, you should be super proud to do it because how many people can say that they've put out a book like that? There's a great either TED Talk and also a blog post by a gentleman called Tim Urban who talks about that, you know, when you're doing a creative project or some way, shape or form, it's really important to, you know, I think he kind of describes how it's a blog about procrastination, and particularly in the arts, like you're basically driven by your own, you know, there's no deadline, there's nothing like that. So procrastination, if you kind of fall short on that, isn't contained. And he describes it as having an instant gratification monkey in your brain. And so if you don't have, you know, your ability, like that discipline to be able to get forward, you can sit with this for years. And again, like you say, fall out of love with the material. But it's a hard effort to sit with that, particularly when you don't know what this novel or piece of work might amount to. If you don't get signed, if you don't do anything like that, and the only real advice you can do is really kind of push on and make sure you actually finish it and get some sort of momentum, would you say?
Totally. And it's quite a solitary thing as well. Like, I think I didn't realize how used to that, like, constant feedback between an editor or whatever, you know, that I have done my cultural writing work. I didn't realize how much I needed that, not validation necessarily, but just like being in contact with someone about your work. And when you're writing a novel, like you can go for sort of a year without talking to anyone about it, you know what I mean? So, and I was very wary of getting other people's eyes on it too early, because I think I'm quite susceptible to if someone is like, oh, I didn't like that, but this was a good idea, why don't you move it more in this in this direction? I'd be like, yeah, that sounds really good. Like, I knew I'd be very susceptible to other people's opinions. So I needed to get down on the page what I wanted before anyone else looked at it. So it's quite solitary as a practice.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about this book that you sat with for many years and dealt with, kind of worked on. And this book is Stinkbug. If you are, we are having counted because we've both been dealing with internet issues. Well, more me specifically. I do have it up on screen for our YouTube broadcast. But for all of our listeners, we're now at the part of the podcast where we do the classic 1 minute pitch. So I've hopped into a lift, Sinéad, you've literally just come out. We're going up a couple of floors. You have an opportunity to pitch this book to me. For the listeners, what is Stinkbug about?
First of all, imagine if I just started getting into lifts and like telling people about my book. What a psycho. Like if I just walked into people's businesses and just was like, hey, yeah, maybe I will. Street marketing, you know. Anyway, okay. So back to the book. Stinkbug is a corporate gothic novel. That's what I'm calling it. About an advertising agency called Winked, who go to a corporate wellness retreat in the mountains. Very remote, very spooky. The retreat purports to be like to boost motivation and job dedication among the workers, but there's a restructure looming at Winked. So the employees sort of suspect that the retreat will have more dire consequences than that. So it's kind of team building on meth. A lot of crazy things happen. Sort of like think 9 to 5 meets The Shining. And that's when you'll get the vibe of Stinkbug.
That's it. Nailed it. Ding, we've arrived at the lift. I love the idea of building on meth. That is hilarious. That's a great way to describe it. But yeah, true to form and true to the bio, this is a darkly funny book. And I love this sort of stuff. I really love black comedy, like comedy with an edge. So I jump on stuff like this, particularly when it takes pot shots at, or takes shots and examinations of things in the everyday. And true to the bio, this book is deeply unhinged. I have experienced workplace retreats, which I think, despite the name, can be frankly exhausting. I have also experienced mass redundancies on multiple occasions, and the drawn-out element where productivity can just drop like that. Like you might not be here in the arvo, so what's the point of working in the morning? I know that funny that you described this book as like gothic, because part of me wants to challenge that in a weird way, because there were moments in this book where I'm like, nah, that actually happened. Like, I can relate to that.
Yeah. No, that's a good challenge. One person has read it and was like, I found this actually like quite re-traumatizing for my time in the corporate world. And I was like, oh God, oh no. I suppose the gothic element comes from like the idea of being haunted and the haunting in a big mansion, a gloomy mansion. But yeah, look, there's some real stuff in there. I'm not going to lie about that.
It's true, but I feel like it's good kind of before we talk a little bit, I want to kind of ask a little bit about Edith and stuff so much. What I think you really nail here first and foremost is that corporate world first and foremost, which can be difficult because, the kind of advertising agencies are kind of viewed in very particular ways, particularly this Winked advertising agency. I think the corporate world, you may disagree here, but there's an element, people kind of view it in an elevated way, especially compared to, other businesses and works. The idea of you being in corporate is kind of seen as kind of, you're on the up. There's the suits, there's the outfits, there's the working in big, massive, shiny buildings. There's the idea of being successful, perceived as successful. We're all part of that quote unquote work family that will force you to stay away from your real family and work overtime. And particularly, what you nail is that it's a loaded space where you're working together, and yet the egos come out and you realize it's also about the competition that you have with one another. It's a place where values can change on a dime, and particularly with Edith and her colleagues, it shows the key thing that I really stood out to me is that this book really nails the compromises that you have to make to survive in an environment like this. Kind of talk to me a little bit about that, because it's such a great part of the book that you nail.
Oh, I'm so glad that resonated with you. That's very kind. Look, I think like camaraderie in workplaces is fantastic. But I think in the novel, the idea of work as family can be problematic, just, because of what you said, basically, the competitive element that you have to sort of be a part of to survive in a workplace like that. So the thing of work as family is problematic. We kind of, I think, as a culture, are coming around to that.
Yes.
First of all, you're not paid to belong to a family. You can't take annual leave from your family. It requires a different sort of commitment than belonging to a workplace. And in Stinkbug, I wanted to highlight and I guess exaggerate how tangled all that workers' family stuff can get when workplace challenges arrive, like competition and, restructure. Like, what happens when your dad fires you? Or what happens when you have to dob on your sister to save yourself? Like, what happens when you find out that you're not paid the same as your twin brother? Like, sometimes workplaces like Winked, the fictional workplace novel, push that family narrative to sort of force intimacy and like demand absolute loyalty from their employees for the sake of like keeping the family together. So it's this tangled thing of like, yes, you have to be competitive. Yes, you're told, especially if you're like in an arts adjacent role, you're repeatedly told that you're lucky to have a job at all and that there's 100 people banging down the door to sort of take your place. So you have to be grateful all the time and loyal to your family and keep them together no matter what. So I think sort of that faux intimacy is what complicates everything in the book, and it's something I've seen in lots of workplaces, lots of my friends' workplaces. It is funny the way you describe corporate as like, you're on the up, you're wearing suits, you're like, but there can be this like, this real sinister stuff going on behind the suits.
It's cutthroat. It can be quite like, It can. I think compared to some other industries, there's a real element of kind of the corporate ladder and the cutthroat nature of the ladder. And you're like, one thing that I was really curious about going into this book was because you kind of talked about a challenging of the 9 to 5, but I reckon you've nailed it because like in a way, the 9 to 5, a lot of people can relate to that and a lot of people can get that, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword because you can, when you're translating that to the page, it can be like, some people's experience of their 9 to 5 might be totally different to another person's experience, but you really nail that kind of corporate element here, particularly through Edith as the kind of the main character. Of course, there are other characters around her, but she's the main hero. At the start of this book, she's really keen to show value to her bosses. She really wants to be that. She's motivated. She's, keen, to talk about to survive this restructure that's kind of going around. The talk of mass redundancy is hanging over all of these characters, and yet there's also elements and secrets in there as well. She's holding a secret which threatens to derail her opportunities and also lead her to be, effectively become cast out by all of her colleagues around her, which this is where the title comes in of the book, The Stinkbug. Tell me a little bit about Edith.
Yeah, so I think Edith is a character who has ambition but doesn't know quite where to place it, doesn't know where it belongs. I think, it was just, we were just talking about the arts and job instability, but I think she's the classic worker at an arts adjacent industry, like just terrified of putting a foot wrong because she knows that she's lucky, or she's been told that she's lucky to even have a job. And, I think she's a character who's dazzled by the free drinks on a Friday and free cereal and sort of idea of abundance because she's, come from a background where abundance has not been available to her and where validation was scarce, and her livelihood really depended on the mood of the people around her. So I think that she's the sort of, I don't want to say broken person. That seems a bit mean to my fictional character, but she is the sort of...
it kind of makes sense a bit. It does, because I think you're right. She is blind by that.
Yeah, totally, and I think that sort of personality type is the type who will totally buy in to the work and family thing because they're receiving a kind of belonging that they have never found in any other part of their life. So the idea of belonging to a family at all costs sends her a bit mad. Makes her make decisions that are definitely not in the best interest of people around her.
Yeah, it doesn't adjust. I think there's, we won't spoil kind of, the secrets that are around her, but I think there's I kind of actually want to talk a little bit about how this ties into the title a little bit, because I know it's kind of on the back cover of the book, but there's a phrase that you have in this book which is which really nails this kind of this kind of dog environment about, and also this being called the Stinkbug, which I'll read out, which is, you're a stink bug and they're worried that if they come anywhere near you, your stench will get all over them and they won't be able to wash it off. First of all, great line. I love me a good bitey, juicy line. Tell me about, not talking spoilers, but that kind of element of the threat of becoming the office outcast and where that fear is. Because for Edith, it's particularly notable, and it particularly means as things get more and more extreme as the book goes on, increasingly starts to challenge her in terms of where her values lie.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It all comes from, it's kind of this wellness movement thing again. I think at Consequy, which is the wellness retreat, the corporate wellness retreat they're all at, they're sort of pushing this toxic positivity that you have to walk around with like a smile plastered on your face at all times. Otherwise, you're seen as counterproductive. And the idea of this manic, upbeat worker is kind of insane, right? Like sometimes you will have bad days. Sometimes you can't give your colleagues everything that they want. So I think when something like a restructure happens in a workplace, especially a workplace like Winked, where like a lot of sort of advertising agencies or media agencies, the social element of your job is quite important. Like the connections that you make over Friday night drinks or, one of the work socials helps you in your day-to-day job. So if you're not seen as someone who's easy to work with, you may not work at that company. And I think when something unstable, like something that causes instability, like a restructure happens, people comport themselves in a totally different way because sometimes you don't know why that restructure is happening. And at a place like Winked, which is not exactly ethical, the idea of being a stink bug or like a downer is sort of career suicide. So, yeah, I thought Edith's worst nightmare would be that her work family would not want to spend time with her, that she would be ejected because of her personality, that people have finally realised that she's rotten to the core. So I thought a nightmare for her would be, her work colleagues finding out that she's perhaps not as positive as the face that she's been giving off in the lunchroom.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I mean that this kind of, it's good that you kind of mentioned this redundancy, because it feels like a bit of a clock in this book. It's kind of hanging over everybody and kind of sitting there, and from my own experience, that it can kind of go one of two ways. If you don't know anything, the worst case scenario allows to fester, and it can completely ruin productivity. If you're in that sort of situation, because you're like, well, I might not even be here in the afternoon. We don't know when these redundancies are coming, but so what's the point of trying to work? But then again, if you find out a little bit more and you're trying to be being filled in as much as you possibly can, then when things don't go ahead, you start to wonder, well, what's really, really going on behind the scenes? And that even makes it even worse. I think it's good that you kind of have this put this through Edith, but of course she's not the only one in this group of individuals that she's working with. Tell me a little bit more about kind of some of these other characters that she plays off with in this story, because I think how they also respond in multiple other ways is also quite interesting. As the story unfolds at this retreat.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. It's like, what's worse, knowing a mass redundancy is coming, or having it be a shock? Like, I've been made redundant. Like, I think lots of people have, especially millennials who entered the market in quite a sucky time. But
wonderful
the job
time.
market, wonderful time. Nothing to worry about. I think that. Look, something I really wanted to touch on as well that's related to that is workplaces who, claim to be friendly places for women, give you a pink cupcake on International Women's Day, but then fire you when you're on maternity leave. And I have I know women who have been made redundant on their maternity leave. Like, I think it's something in Australia that we don't talk about a lot. And women coming back to work after they've had children, and how they're treated. Like, it was something I really wanted to touch on in the book. And so those characters who do have children or have recently been on maternity leave, at Winked, they're terrified that they're going to be seen as not focused enough, or an easy person to pick off because they're distracted, inverted commas, So I think those characters are rightfully terrified because Winked is not respecting their life choices, expecting work to be the only thing that's on their mind. So I guess other characters who are Winked is their religion kind of fall down, and it sends them a bit mad. But, you've got other characters like Mo, who's Edith's best work friend in the novel, who manages to have quite a healthy outlook on work, that work is work and whatever happens outside of work is, you don't take that to the office. But even she has a sort of skepticism of Winked and doesn't believe that they will help her when she needs it. So I did want to explore how that sort of threat manifests in different ways with different personality types. And I was really interested in just like taking those office cliches and those office personas and putting them in a different place where they have no control, and seeing how those dynamics still play out. It's kind of like, when you meet a childhood friend that you haven't seen in 20 years and you kind of revert back to who you were when you first met them. That's kind of what I wanted to test, to see if these work colleagues act like colleagues when you take them out of the office. I don't know if I've answered your question there. I've rambled a bit, but
No, you absolutely have. And this actually serves as a really good segue to kind of one of the last things I wanted to ask about the book, because I wanted to talk about your use of place, particularly. Place has become something that I'm really, really interested on. And let's talk about this corporate retreat, Conseque. Great name. I love I love the use of the space here. People get there, the phones are confiscated, the team building activities that become, look, more and more extreme, but I'm also like, yeah. And then I also kind of, and all of this happening within this remote corporate retreat. And I love particularly corporate retreat, quote unquote. I feel like it's such a loaded phrase to have that. It's a place that, it's an environment with ever-changing power. There's things happening behind closed doors. There's lots and lots of secrets between all the participants involved. Tell me a little bit about the impact of this place, of Conseque, on these characters, and then also translating that to the page. Because, I mean, you struck that balancing act very, very well.
Oh, thank you. I think what I was trying to figure out, I knew that I wanted the characters to be in a place where they couldn't have phones and they didn't have reception. And as, we probably established already, I'm a bit of a pop culture nerd. So I really had Picnic at Hanging Rock in my head when I was thinking about the actual place of Conseque. And I was looking at all these photos of convents that had been built in Australia in the late 1800s, like these massive ornate buildings that just didn't, like, they were just sort of dumped in the bush, and they didn't really feel like they belonged there. So I wanted to make the building feel remote, but the nature around it was sort of alive. Like, you're hearing birds, there's creepy crawlies, there's lots of things happening. Like, the building was imposing order where there should be wild bush. So I think, and also I went to Catholic school, so I always have Catholic iconography in my head, living rent free there forever. So I think, those notions of sacrifice and obedience, and don't look beyond your patch and follow the leader unquestionably. Like, I think that's sort of those Catholic stories and those stories about saints and artwork really fed into sort of the dedication that Winked was asking of its employees. So it all came together like that for me. But I can't get that Catholic stuff out of my head. I think that's kind of was the backbone of the corporate retreat for me.
Yeah, for me it was the Anglican side of it. I was kind of like, it's very similar. Yeah, I totally got it. And it's so funny you mentioned that, because like it, as much as we view this idea of modern day business and that modern day corporate world being different, there is also what was interesting for me about being in this particular place is how it kind of just felt, how much have we actually progressed here in terms of previous things of the past. I'm actually kind of curious, now that you have been, you've finished this book and it's about to go out into the world at the time of us recording. What did it teach you writing this book and sitting with this story and these characters? Can we change that corporate culture? Can it even be saved, or are we just dealing with the human condition here and effectively we're fucked?
I feel like if I knew the answer to that, I could sell a lot more books. Do you know what I mean? Like I could write a self-help
if only.
that would make me a millionaire. Look, I think the thing I learned when I was writing was just what I said before, that I think we sometimes forget what we actually need to be happy at work. And it's not free drinks. It's not like a day where the team all goes go-karting. Like it's not chips. Like it's not having like a free lunch once a week, although that can be helpful financially. People want what they have always wanted since work began. They want to be paid decently. They want to be able to take time off when they're sick, and they want to be able to go home at a reasonable hour. And I think we just like add all these frills to things of like, and it does feel like it's sinister sometimes, and it does encourage people to stay longer hours and like, oh, I won't take sick leave because they paid so much money for me to go to that karaoke party last week. Do you know what I mean? Like I think that as I was writing the book, it made me realize more and more that like it's just not that complicated. And some corporations, like the fictional one that I in the book, don't necessarily care about their employees' well-being, but they love to put on sort of a front that shows on paper that they're really investing in their people. But what they're really investing in is extra time at the office, the idea of loyalty and the idea of family. So I think just writing that, it just made me, by the time I finished, I was like, oh, this is just all like, I really like, maybe in my 20s, Friday night was like very good, and like a catered, charcuterie table was like very impressive. But those were also jobs that I was there till like 11 p.m. at night. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that complicated.
Yeah. I think a good learning I picked up from this book, it was more of a reaffirmation, and maybe I've only really picked this up since, I've entered my early 30s, which, having more time in the workforce. And that is that really, kind of off the back of that, all of this sort of extra stuff is kind of superfluous, really. What you really, it's kind of all, it's not really the key priority. The key priority is that you find a job, trying to find a role or a job or a purpose where the crap and the bullshit that you've got to deal with every day is enough to deal with, because the positives outshine the negatives in a way, so to speak. Yeah. And that you shouldn't try to, and also particularly if that kind of toxic environment is seeping through into your personal work life, and that work-life balance is non-existent, then it's important that you reconsider your priorities, because at the end of the day, you're only on this planet for one. You want to have a lot of joy and happiness in your life. And so there was a lot I learned from this book. It was kind of a realization about where how valuable your time is, was a good thing that I picked up from this.
Thank you. And it's every job is a set of problems, right? You've got problems in every single job that you have in your life. It's just about, is this a set of problems that I can manage? And I think when you look at it like that, you can avoid that thing like it bleeding over into your personal life and turning everything to shit. Like, it's hard. But it is hard because, you know, I'm 36. It takes like, I think it takes a while and working in different workplaces to see how you fit in that world. And unfortunately, the world will never regulate itself for you. You have to regulate yourself. So you can't control how some workplaces work, but you can control how you comport yourself in them. So, yeah, I'm glad that came through in the book, but I wish I had all the answers and then I could just like be a famous like workplace self-help guru. That'd be awesome.
Well, look, at least we're talking about the topics with books like Stinkbug and with examinations of it like Stinkbug. Out of curiosity, what's next? Will you write more fiction again?
Yeah, I've got a couple of ideas for novels, so kind of that's happening at the moment. Yeah, I'd to be able to write another one. I hope I get the opportunity. So, you know, it's very, very hard to get books published in this country, but yeah, I've got some possibly more unhinged ideas that are percolating at the moment. When I wrote Stinkbug, it didn't feel that unhinged to me. So when people are saying, wow, it's so weird, I'm like, really? And anyway, but yeah, the ideas I'm working on now are a bit weirder than Stinkbug, so we'll see how that goes.
We'll finish with a rapid fire part of the date. This is kind of a rapid fire part of the podcast where I basically get a bunch of questions and I fling them at you and you give me the first answer that comes to the head. Does that sound all right?
Yep, let's go.
All right, let's do this. So first up, of course, if you are a big writer, usually there's a correlation with being a big reader. And my first question is, what is your favorite book that you've read in the last 12 months?
Okay, easily. It's Woo Woo by Ella Baxter, the Melbourne writer. It's just like, have you read it? Have you read Woo Woo?
No, I haven't. This is news to me. This is all new.
Okay, you've got to read it. It's just like a sumptuous, gross look at the creative process and putting your work into the world and how you're meant to exist simultaneously with your work. And it's one of the most mental books I've ever read. I don't know if you've read her first book, New Animal, but this one is even better than that. And it is just like disgusting and wonderful.
Oh, sounds amazing. I love it where it's no warts and all is always the best sort of stuff. So yes, please.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, what is your favorite debut novel that you've ever read?
So that would be Brother of the More Famous Jack by Barbara Trapido. It was released in 1982. Read it if you have not, everybody. I read it, I think last year, maybe before, and it immediately became one of my favorite books of all time. I'd never even heard of it. I don't know why it's not the most famous book on the planet. It's about a teenager called Catherine attending Oxford Uni in the 70s, and she sort of enmeshes herself in like the eccentric family of one of the professors, and you know, all these crazy arty life experiences. It kind of, reading it feels like turning on the light in your brain. So anyone who loves like campus novels or just like anything set in Europe in the 70s would just love it, or family stories, family sagas. Yeah, it's just an insane book.
I love it when you like suddenly come across a gem like from the past that you don't realize how good it is and how much it activates things. Like whenever people have actually thrown this question back at me, my normal answer is To Kill a Mockingbird. But I must admit, when I read The Animals in That Country from Laura G. McKay, love that book. Absolutely love it. It's a
showstopper. It's insane, isn't it? It's
so
such
good.
a good book. It's so good. Yeah. It's funny when you read, I love when you read something like that you just want to push into people's hands immediately. You know?
Yes. Read this. Read it. I won't be afraid to admit that I actually did that. It's so true. Do you have a favorite word?
Oh my God. have so many favorite words. Can it just be like my favorite word for right now? This day?
Of course.
Okay.
Yep.
Punish. I love the word punish. Because you can say it in like, oh, you will be punished, like God, like calling down to like, you know, terrible citizens. Or you can say, oh, she was such a punish. You know, like there's so many ways that you can use punish, but they're all devastating.
And devastating either in potentially bad or good ways. I mean, you can even take it and go like totally a whole other way, like you will be punished. Which,
exactly.
Sounds.
It's a great word.
I'm slightly embarrassed that my mind immediately went there when you said the word punish.
No, that's the thing. That just like solidified how good punish is. You just like validated my job.
You know, as part of your job, you do TV. You did popular TV recaps when writing for Junkie. I'm going to put you on the spot here and say which out of your personal experience were your favorite to write: Game of Thrones, The Bachelor, or The Bachelorette?
Oh, it had to be Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was simultaneously the most serious and silliest show on television, and we were all poring over it like it was an academic text. And it's like, you guys, this is a show where like there are dragons and also two twins who are in love. Like it was just so silly, and I loved like, because like when a show is so self-serious, it's so easy to make jokes about it. So, and I did it with love. Like I loved Game of Thrones, and it was so much fun when we were watching the same show and could talk about it. It was like the last water cooler show, right? Where you could come into the office and like be like, oh my God, did you watch that last night? But easily Game of Thrones. It was just so much fun. It was so much fun to talk about every week.
Yeah, even when like the show in its later seasons everyone became more and more divided about it. That's what it made it even more fun, because it was just like the differing opinions would come out, and it would just be hilarious how engrossed people were really getting into it. When you're like, it's just a show, guys. Like
it's just a show. Stop fighting. Yeah, and people just defending it to the death. It's like they can't hear you. The creators can't hear you. Relax.
Combined with the petition of like they must rewrite the show and do it again because people didn't like the ending. I'm just like,
oh my God, it's like touch grass, you know what I mean? Like it's just, people were insane about it, but that was so much fun. Like we don't do that now. There are no shows that we do that with. There's no petitions flying around now. So I miss those days.
If there is one part of corporate culture that you suddenly had the ability to change immediately, what would it be?
Oh my God. That's a really good question. Forced socializing.
Oh,
I think it's good. Let people make friends organically. It will happen. Stop putting them in weird groups with name tags and asking them to do trust falls or be in like a quiz team. Just let people make mates on their own. It's fine. We're not in grade prep.
I feel like that touched her. That went even harder on that with it. You meet Edith in a lift. Like she is manifested into the real world, and you've met her in a lift. What's the first thing you do or say to her? Quit
your job, girl. Quit your job.
Is there a particular story about the corporate world, whether it be fiction or non-fiction, that you think readers should check out?
Ooh, you know what? I've just read the book Ritual, which has just come out by Chloe Elizabeth Wilson, which is about a cult beauty brand that is actually a cult. And I think she skewers that sort of, it's very, very similar themes to Stinkbug, but I think she really skewers that like girl boss corporate culture. I'm a woman, so, but if you criticize me as a woman, you hate women. I think she talks about the gender in business, gender in the corporate world in such a deft way. It's a really good workplace satire, and I would suggest people check it out. Also, the first season of Severance, not the second season.
Great answers, love that. And then last question. we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but now I feel like I need to poke you a little bit more about it. What's the strangest team building activity you've ever done on a corporate retreat?
Oh my God.
At the risk of spoilers.
What's the strangest team building activity I've ever done? Well, look, I have to say the strangest one I've heard, this isn't me, so this is cheating, but I had a friend who went on a corporate retreat once, and they had sort of these accountability sessions where people could speak freely about the workplace. And then it turned out that it just was like a weekend of slinging shit on the executive team, really. And like a group of like junior colleagues ended up sort of taking over the retreat. Like it was like a Lord of the Flies sort of scenario. They set the agenda for the rest of the weekend, and so it kind of backfired. So I know that's cheating because it's not me, but the idea of having an accountability session just is like goes beyond my belief. Yeah, so that's the one I've heard.
I would love to have been on a fly on the wall for that. Just watch the chaos.
Literally. Madness.
Yeah. This has been so much fun, Sinead. Thank you so much for all of our listeners. Stinkbug, it's been published by Affirm Press. It's about to come out at the time of us recording, but when you're listening, it'll be out in the world. You can get a copy right now down in the description. It's published by Affirm Press. Sinead, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on Date with a Debut.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Date with a Debut, and for listening to the Words and Nerds channel. You can buy all books mentioned in today's episode down in the description box, and if you enjoyed the show, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up. It really helps the show out. If you want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. Want to support the show more? You can also subscribe to my Patreon in the description to get early access to episodes, book reviews, recommendations, and a whole lot more. Catch you soon! Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcast co-production.